October 7, 1941. A dusty road outside Vyazma, Soviet Union. Hauptmann Ernst Müller stood beside his disabled Kübelwagen, watching something that made no tactical sense. An American vehicle, olive drab and boxy, bounced across terrain that should have stopped it cold. The driver seemed almost careless, steering through ruts and over obstacles that would require careful navigation in German equipment. The vehicle's suspension absorbed impacts that should have damaged axles. Its small engine maintained speed up an incline, where Müller's Kübelwagen would have needed lower gearing and careful throttle control. One of Müller's men, a mechanic named Josef Baumann, shaded his eyes against the autumn sun. American Lend-Lease, Herr Hauptmann. The Soviets are receiving them by the thousands. It looks like a toy, Müller said, and he meant it. The vehicle appeared almost comically simple. Flat panels, exposed components, no refinement visible in its design. Compared to the Kübelwagen's elegant lines and sophisticated engineering, the American machine looked primitive, hastily assembled, barely worthy of military service. Within 3 years, that assessment would haunt him, because by 1944, German forces across every theatre would be capturing, stealing, and desperately seeking these toys whenever possible. Not because German vehicles had failed, but because the American Jeep and what it represented had succeeded in ways that challenged everything the Wehrmacht believed about engineering, warfare, and industrial capacity. The realization would not come as a sudden revelation. It would accumulate gradually, through thousands of encounters, captured vehicles, intelligence reports, and battlefield experiences. Each piece of evidence adding to a conclusion that German officers and engineers found increasingly difficult to ignore. America had not built a better vehicle. They had built something more dangerous. A sufficient vehicle, manufactured in numbers that made superiority irrelevant. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The German military's initial assessment of the Jeep was shaped by decades of engineering tradition. German automotive design emphasized precision, sophistication, and performance optimization. Every component was engineered to exacting standards. Every system was refined through careful analysis. The result was vehicles that represented the pinnacle of automotive engineering. The Kübelwagen embodied this philosophy perfectly. Ferdinand Porsche had designed it with typical German attention to detail. Its air-cooled engine eliminated the vulnerability of liquid cooling systems. Its lightweight construction improved fuel efficiency. Its torsion bar suspension provided excellent ride quality. The vehicle was lighter, more fuel-efficient, and more technically sophisticated than the American Jeep. When Wehrmacht intelligence first obtained photographs and specifications of the Willys MB in 1941, the assessment reflected German confidence in their own approach. The report noted the Jeep's heavier weight, its liquid-cooled engine vulnerable to combat damage, its crude leaf spring suspension, and its generally unsophisticated design. The conclusion was predictable. The American vehicle was adequate for its purpose but inferior to German equivalents in most measurable specifications. This assessment was not wrong in its technical details. The Kübelwagen was indeed lighter, at approximately 1,540 pounds compared to the Jeep's 2,450 pounds. It was more fuel-efficient, consuming less gasoline per kilometre travelled. Its air-cooled engine did eliminate radiator vulnerability, but the assessment missed something fundamental. It evaluated the Jeep as an individual vehicle rather than as a component in a system. And systems, not individual vehicles, win modern wars. The first Jeeps encountered by German forces in combat came through Soviet Lend-Lease deliveries in late 1941. The United States had not yet entered the war, but American equipment was already reaching the Eastern Front through British convoys to Murmansk and Arkhangelsk. Soviet units receiving these vehicles reported mixed initial reactions. Some praised their reliability and four-wheel drive capability. Others complained about their higher fuel consumption compared to Soviet trucks and their vulnerability to cold weather starting without proper procedures. German intelligence collected these Soviet assessments with interest. The reports seemed to confirm that American vehicles were adequate but not exceptional. useful additions to Soviet logistics but not game-changing equipment. What the intelligence assessments missed was the scale. In 1941, the United States delivered approximately 5,000 vehicles to the Soviet Union through Lend-Lease. In 1942, that number increased to 43,000 vehicles. By 1943, over 100,000 American vehicles would reach Soviet forces annually. Hauptmann Müller encountered his second Jeep in December of 1941, during the desperate fighting outside Moscow. His reconnaissance unit had captured a Soviet supply column, and among the vehicles was a Willys MB, abandoned by its crew but otherwise intact. Müller's unit was critically short of transportation. The winter offensive had stretched supply lines beyond sustainability, and vehicles were breaking down faster than replacements arrived. The captured Jeep represented needed transport capacity, regardless of its origin. Baumann, the mechanic, conducted a quick field assessment. The engine started immediately despite sub-freezing temperatures. The four-wheel drive engaged smoothly. The heating system, crude but functional, began warming, the cab within minutes. "It runs well, Herr Hauptmann," Baumann reported. "Simple engine, basic systems, but everything works." "Can you maintain it?" Müller asked. Baumann opened the hood and examined the engine compartment. What he found surprised him. The engine was remarkably accessible. Every major component could be reached without removing other parts. The spark plugs were clearly visible and easily replaced. The distributor cap required only simple tools to service. The oil filter was positioned for easy access. "Yes, Herr Hauptmann, this engine is designed for field maintenance. A mechanic with basic training could service it." This was the first indication that American design philosophy differed fundamentally from German engineering. German vehicles were sophisticated machines requiring skilled mechanics and proper facilities for maintenance. The Kübelwagen's horizontally opposed engine, while efficient, required more complex servicing procedures. Its reduction gearboxes, though effective, needed careful adjustment. The Jeep appeared to have been designed assuming that mechanics in the field would be semi-skilled soldiers working with limited tools under combat conditions. Every component was positioned for accessibility. Every system used standard tools and common procedures. Müller's unit kept the Jeep operational throughout the winter. It became the vehicle of choice for forward reconnaissance because it started reliably in cold weather, and its four-wheel drive handled snow and ice better than the Kübelwagen's rear-wheel drive. German soldiers began to appreciate its practicality, even while considering it crude compared to their own equipment. The pattern repeated across the Eastern Front throughout 1942. German units capturing Jeeps found them useful despite their apparent simplicity. The vehicles worked, required minimal maintenance, and performed adequately in conditions where German vehicles struggled. But these were seen as individual cases, isolated examples of captured equipment proving serviceable. The larger pattern remained invisible. By summer of 1942, Wehrmacht intelligence was receiving reports from multiple fronts about American vehicle production. The numbers seemed impossible. Willys Overland and Ford together were producing Jeeps at a rate exceeding 1,000 units per day. Total production for 1942 would reach approximately 200,000 vehicles. Germany's entire production of Kübelwagens from 1940 through 1945 would total approximately 50,000 units. The ratio was stunning. For every Kübelwagen Germany produced, America manufactured 4 Jeeps, but the intelligence assessments focused on technical specifications rather than implications. German analysts noted American vehicles' shortcomings in individual performance metrics while missing the strategic significance of overwhelming numerical superiority. Major Hans Weber, a logistics officer stationed in Berlin, was among the first to recognize the pattern. Weber had access to comprehensive intelligence reports from all theaters, and he spent months analyzing vehicle data. What emerged from his analysis was deeply troubling. American vehicle production was not just larger than German production, it was fundamentally different in character. German production emphasized quality and precision. Factories produced vehicles to exacting standards, with skilled craftsmen ensuring each unit met specifications. Production rates were limited by the complexity of manufacturing and the need for quality control at every step. American production emphasized quantity and standardization. Factories produced vehicles to adequate standards, with semi-skilled workers performing repetitive tasks on assembly lines. Production rates were limited primarily by factory capacity rather than individual worker skill. Weber compiled a report in August of 1942, outlining his findings. The Wehrmacht was engaged in an industrial war against an opponent whose industrial capacity exceeded Germany's by factors that could not be overcome through tactical or operational excellence. American factories were producing military vehicles at rates of thousands per day. German factories were producing hundreds per week. The disparity was not temporary. It was structural, built into the respective industrial systems. The report was circulated among senior logistics officers, but generated limited response. Germany's military leadership in 1942 remained confident in operational superiority. American equipment might be numerous, but German equipment was superior in quality. German tactics were more sophisticated. German soldiers were better trained. These advantages would offset any material disparity. What this assessment missed was the relationship between quantity and sustainability. Modern warfare consumed equipment at rates that exceeded at any previous conflict. Vehicles broke down, were destroyed in combat, became inoperable due to part shortages or maintenance issues. The side that could replace losses faster gained cumulative advantage regardless of individual equipment quality. The North African campaign provided the first comprehensive demonstration of this principle. When American forces landed in North Africa in November of 1942 as part of Operation Torch, they brought equipment in quantities that stunned German and Italian observers. The initial landings alone involved over 350 ships, delivering troops and supplies to multiple beaches simultaneously. Among those supplies were thousands of vehicles, including jeeps, trucks, half-tracks, and tanks. Oberst Friedrich Lang commanded a German reconnaissance battalion in Tunisia. His first encounter with American forces in December of 1942 provided an education in material abundance that contradicted everything his training had taught him. His battalion attacked an American supply convoy on a road east of Tiburba. The convoy consisted of approximately 40 vehicles, mostly GMC trucks, with several jeeps providing security. Lang's forces destroyed or captured 15 vehicles before the Americans withdrew. It was a successful tactical engagement that should have disrupted enemy logistics. But the next day, American convoys resumed on the same road with no apparent reduction in traffic. The vehicles Lang had destroyed were simply replaced. Within a week, American vehicle traffic on that route exceeded pre-attack levels. They treat vehicles like ammunition, Lange noted in his after-action report. We destroy them and they bring more. There is no attrition effect. Our attacks inflict tactical damage, but no operational impact. This observation would be repeated in reports from across North Africa throughout early 1943. German forces could win tactical engagements, destroy American vehicles, capture supply depots. But American logistics continued functioning because replacement vehicles and supplies arrived faster than German forces could destroy them. The captured jeeps from these engagements told their own story. When German mechanics examined them closely, patterns emerged that were both impressive and disturbing. Every jeep was essentially identical to every other jeep, regardless of where or when it had been manufactured. Parts from one vehicle fit other vehicles perfectly. A distributor cap from a Ford-built Jeep fit a Willys-built Jeep exactly. Spark plugs, fuel pumps, electrical components, all were completely interchangeable. This level of standardization seemed impossible to German engineers. German military vehicles required filing, fitting, and adjustment even when components came from the same factory. Manufacturing tolerances created variation that mechanics had to accommodate through skilled hand-fitting. The idea that components from different factories separated by thousands of miles would fit together perfectly without modification seemed to violate fundamental principles of manufacturing. Yet the evidence was undeniable. American standardization was not theoretical. It was real, built into every component, enforced through manufacturing precision that German industry had never attempted at comparable scale. The implications were profound. Complete interchangeability meant simplified logistics. Any part could repair any vehicle. Warehouses did not need to stock vehicle-specific components. Mechanics did not need to learn the quirks of different production batches. The entire logistics system was simplified through standardization. Complete interchangeability also meant simplified training. A mechanic who learned to service one Jeep could service any Jeep. There were no variants requiring specialized knowledge, no production-specific modifications requiring different procedures. Training could be standardized, just like the tableless vehicles themselves, allowing rapid preparation of maintenance personnel. And complete interchangeability meant accelerated production. When every component was identical and every component fit perfectly every time, assembly became a series of simple, repetitive operations. Workers did not need years of apprenticeship to develop fitting and adjustment skills. They needed days or weeks of training to perform specific assembly tasks. This allowed factories to employ semi-skilled workers, housewives, teenagers, elderly workers, anyone capable of following procedures and performing repetitive operations. Hauptmann Müller, now commanding a larger reconnaissance unit in Tunisia, accumulated 5 captured jeeps by March of 1943. His mechanics maintained them using parts scavenged from damaged vehicles and captured supply depots. The interchangeability made this almost trivially easy. A mechanic could walk into a captured American parts depot, grab components from different crates, and install them in any Jeep with confidence they would fit. "I have never seen equipment designed this way," Baumann told Müller one evening. "Our vehicles are built for performance. American vehicles are built for production and maintenance. In peacetime, our approach is superior. In war, their approach is devastating." Müller understood what Baumann meant. The Kübelwagen was a better vehicle in most technical specifications, but the Jeep was better suited to the realities of sustained combat operations. It required less skill to maintain, accepted more abuse without catastrophic failure, and could be repaired using standard procedures that any mechanic could learn quickly. Multiply those advantages by hundreds of thousands of vehicles, and the result was a logistics system that could sustain operations almost regardless of equipment losses. The mathematics became inescapable by April of 1943. American forces in North Africa operated with vehicle availability rates exceeding 80%. German forces struggled to maintain 50% availability due to part shortages and maintenance delays. An American unit with 100 vehicles on inventory could expect 85 operational at any time. A German unit with 100 vehicles could expect 40 to 50 operational. This meant the effective disparity was not just the production ratio of 4 American vehicles for every German vehicle. It was the production ratio multiplied by the availability ratio. The combined effect was that American forces operated with roughly 8 times the effective vehicle capacity of German forces of equivalent nominal strength. And the disparity was growing. American production was ramping up throughout 1943, while German production struggled to maintain existing levels under increasing Allied bombing. The Axis surrender in Tunisia in May of 1943 captured this reality in stark terms. Approximately 250,000 German and Italian soldiers became prisoners, many of them experienced veterans, skilled officers, trained specialists. They had fought with skill and determination. They had inflicted significant casualties on Allied forces. They had demonstrated tactical competence repeatedly. But they had been defeated by a logistics system they could not disrupt, supplied by an industrial capacity they could not match, sustained by vehicle production they could not destroy fast enough to matter. The masterpiece had lost to the system. Excellence had been overwhelmed by adequacy delivered in crushing quantities. The journey to prisoner of war camps became an extended education in American industrial capacity. Hauptmann Müller and thousands of other captured Wehrmacht soldiers crossed the Mediterranean on American Liberty ships, vessels that embodied the same production philosophy as the Jeep. These cargo ships, capable of carrying 10,000 tons, were being manufactured. at a rate that seemed impossible. American shipyards completed Liberty ships in an average of 42 days by mid-1943. Some were built in as little as 4 days and 15 hours as publicity demonstrations. Germany had never achieved comparable shipbuilding rates, even during peacetime. The Kriegsmarine's ambitious Plan Z called for constructing a fleet over 8 years that America was building in months. The Liberty ship program alone would produce over 2,700 vessels during the war, more ships than Germany had built in its entire maritime history. Müller stood on deck during the crossing, watching the horizon. Dozens of other ships were visible at various points, all moving in convoy, all carrying troops or supplies or equipment. The scale of the operation was difficult to comprehend. This was one convoy on one route across one ocean. Similar convoys were crossing the Atlantic continuously, delivering millions of tons of supplies to support operations in North Africa, Britain, and soon Italy. Josef Baumann stood beside him, leaning against the rail. "I've been thinking about the jeeps, Herr Hauptmann," the mechanic said. "We captured perhaps 24 during our time in Tunisia. We destroyed maybe 50 more. And yet the Americans never seemed to have fewer vehicles. Every convoy had jeeps. Every supply depot had jeeps. Every unit had more jeeps than they needed." "They manufacture them faster than we can destroy them," Müller replied. "That's the equation we couldn't solve." "It's more than that," Baumann continued. "They manufacture everything faster than we can destroy it. The trucks, the tanks, the ships, the aircraft. We inflict tactical damage but no strategic impact. Their production system simply replaces losses and continues growing." The conversation was interrupted by an American sailor passing by, a young man, perhaps 19 years old, who walked with the casual confidence of someone who had never doubted in his nation's ultimate victory. That confidence was not arrogance, Müller realized. It was justified. America's industrial system had earned the right to confidence. The processing center at Oran, Algeria, provided the first comprehensive view of American logistics operating at scale. Thousands of prisoners passed through the facility daily, all being catalogued, documented, and assigned to transport. The operation ran with mechanical efficiency that would have been impossible without abundant equipment and standardized procedures. What struck Müller most was the vehicle motor pool. Hundreds of vehicles sat in organized rows. Jeeps, GMC trucks, Dodge trucks, International Harvester trucks, white half-tracks, all maintained by crews of young American soldiers who moved through their tasks with practiced ease. The facility had more vehicles than an entire German division possessed, and this was just one administrative center among dozens supporting operations in North Africa. Major Weber, the logistics officer who had written the prescient report in 1942, found himself at the same processing center. He had been captured during the final defense of Tunis, and his analytical mind continued working even in captivity. He observed everything, noting details that confirmed his earlier assessments. The American motor pool operated on principles that inverted German logistics philosophy. German units treated vehicles as precious resources to be carefully maintained and conserved. American units treated vehicles as expendable tools to be used intensively and replaced when necessary. This approach only worked because replacement vehicles were abundant and parts were standardized. Weber watched an American mechanic service, a Jeep. The procedure was simple, almost routine. Drain the oil, replace the filter, refill with fresh oil, check other fluid levels, inspect tires, test lights and electrical systems. The entire service took perhaps 30 minutes. The mechanic was young, probably 20 years old, and worked with the confidence of someone who had performed this same task hundreds of times. A German mechanic servicing a Kübelwagen required more time and greater skill. The horizontally opposed engine was more complex to access. The reduction gear hubs required careful inspection and adjustment. The electrical system used components that varied between production batches, requiring knowledge of specific vehicle history. German maintenance was an art requiring experience. American maintenance was a procedure requiring only basic training. Weber struck up a conversation with an American sergeant who supervised the motor pool. The sergeant spoke adequate German, learned from immigrant parents in Milwaukee. "You're a logistics officer?" the sergeant asked, after Weber introduced himself. "Must be interesting seeing how we do things differently." "Very interesting," Weber replied carefully. "Your vehicle availability rates are impressive." The sergeant shrugged. "We got good equipment and plenty of parts. Long as we follow the maintenance schedules and don't do anything stupid, the vehicles keep running. When something breaks that we can't fix quickly, we swap in a replacement and send the broken one back to a depot for rebuild." "You have enough vehicles to simply replace broken ones rather than repair them immediately?" "Sure. We got jeeps coming out of our ears. Must be 50 of them at this facility alone, and we're just a processing center. Combat units get priority, but even rear area facilities like this got more vehicles than we strictly need. The philosophy is that having excess capacity is cheaper than having insufficient capacity. This represented a complete inversion of German military economics. Germany operated on scarcity, carefully rationing limited resources. America operated on abundance, overproducing to ensure availability exceeded demand. The American approach seemed wasteful from a German perspective, but Weber recognized its devastating effectiveness. Waste in peacetime became resilience in wartime. Excess capacity meant operations never halted for lack of equipment. The transport to America took 2 weeks aboard another Liberty ship. The vessel was crowded with prisoners, but conditions were adequate. Food was sufficient, medical care was available, guards were professional rather than brutal. For men who had spent months in desert combat under increasingly desperate conditions, the journey felt almost surreal. They were prisoners, defeated, transported to indefinite captivity. Yet, they were treated with a bureaucratic efficiency that suggested their captors could easily afford to maintain them. Camp Hale, Colorado, sat in the Rocky Mountains at an elevation exceeding 9,000 feet. The camp had been constructed to train American mountain troops, but was now hosting German prisoners who were assigned to various work details. Skilled mechanics like Baumann were assigned to the motor pool, where their expertise was valued despite their prisoner status. The camp's motor pool contained approximately 200 vehicles serving a facility that housed several thousand prisoners and guards. The vehicle density seemed absurdly high by German standards. A German facility of comparable size would have perhaps 30 to 40 vehicles, and those would be zealously conserved. The American camp used vehicles casually, driving them for tasks that German forces would accomplish by foot or horse-drawn transport. Baumann began working in the motor pool in July of 1943. The American sergeant in charge, a man named Thompson from rural Nebraska, treated the German mechanics with cautious respect. "You guys know your way around engines," Thompson acknowledged. "Heard German vehicles are pretty sophisticated." "Well, ours are simpler. Should be easy for you to figure out." The understatement was remarkable. American military vehicles were almost trivially simple compared to German equivalents. Baumann serviced his first Jeep at Camp Hale within an hour of starting work. The procedure was straightforward, following clear documentation in maintenance manuals that assumed no prior knowledge. Change the oil every 1,000 miles or 60 days. Replace the air filter every 5,000 miles. Check tire pressure weekly. The entire maintenance regime could be memorized in an afternoon. Over the following months, Baumann observed American maintenance philosophy in action. The emphasis was on prevention rather than repair. Regular scheduled maintenance prevented most failures. When failures occurred despite maintenance, the response was to replace the failed component rather than repair it. Replacement was faster than repair, and replacement parts were abundant. German maintenance philosophy emphasized repair because replacement parts were scarce. Mechanics learned to rebuild components, fabricate replacements, and keep equipment operational through improvisation. These were valuable skills born of necessity. American mechanics rarely needed such skills because they could simply install new components from well-stocked supply rooms. "Your parts availability is extraordinary," Baumann mentioned to Thompson one afternoon. They had developed a working relationship built on mutual respect for mechanical competence. "In the Wehrmacht, we could wait weeks for critical parts. Here, You have everything immediately available. Thompson walked Baumann to the parts storage building. Rows of shelves held thousands of components, all clearly labeled and organized. This is just for the motor pool at one camp in Colorado, Thompson explained. Multiply this by every camp, every base, every deployed unit worldwide. The supply system stocks parts everywhere because manufacturing them is cheaper than dealing with downtime from shortages. Baumann examined the inventory. Shelves held dozens of distributor caps, all identical. Boxes contained hundreds of spark plugs in various heat ranges. Oil filters were stacked in quantities sufficient to service the motor pool's entire vehicle inventory multiple times. The abundance was staggering. Germany would consider this inventory sufficient for a core-level supply depot. America considered it appropriate for one motor pool at one training camp. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. The thing you have to understand, Thompson continued, is that we designed the whole system together. The vehicles, the parts, the supply chain, the maintenance procedures, everything was planned as an integrated system. That's why it works so smoothly. This was the insight that German logistics had never fully achieved. Germany had excellent vehicles, sophisticated engineering, and skilled mechanics, but these elements were not integrated into a comprehensive system. Each component was optimized individually without sufficient attention to how they functioned together. American military logistics was not a collection of good components. It was a complete system where every element reinforced every other element. By 1944, prisoners at camps across America had formed informal networks, sharing information and observations. Letters passed between camps, carefully censored by American authorities but still conveying key facts. The consensus that emerged from these communications was sobering. America's industrial capacity exceeded German pre-war estimates by factors that made continued resistance increasingly futile. Hauptmann Müller, assigned to Camp Ruston in Louisiana, received a letter from Weber in early 1944. Weber had been assigned to Camp Trinidad in Colorado and was working in administrative roles due to his education and officer rank. The letter discussed topics permitted by censors, family news, general observations about camp life. But embedded within the mundane details was analysis. I have observed that the guards here drive approximately 200 miles to visit home on weekend leave, Weber wrote. They use military vehicles for this purpose, consuming fuel and creating wear without apparent concern. This casual usage of military resources would be impossible in the Wehrmacht. It suggests that their logistics system operates with such abundance that recreational usage of military equipment is considered acceptable. Müller understood the implication. American military logistics had capacity exceeding operational requirements by margins so large that waste was tolerable. This was not efficiency in the German sense of maximizing output from limited resources. This was abundance, eliminating the need for efficiency. When resources were effectively unlimited, careful conservation became unnecessary. The camp newspapers, published by American authorities and distributed to prisoners, provided information about the war's progress. The publications were propaganda, certainly, but the basic facts were verifiable through multiple sources. The Allied invasion of Normandy in June of 1944, the rapid advance across France during summer, the liberation of Paris in August. The approach toward Germany's borders by autumn. Each advance was supported by logistics that German prisoners recognized as impossible for Wehrmacht capabilities. The Red Ball Express, operating throughout late summer and autumn of 1944, delivered 12,000 tons of supplies daily using 6,000 trucks. German prisoners read these figures with grim fascination. The Wehrmacht's entire supply system for the Eastern Front, spanning over 1,000 miles from the Baltic to the Black Sea, moved approximately 15,000 tons daily, using trucks, trains, and horse-drawn transport combined. The Americans were moving nearly that tonnage on a single supply route in France using trucks alone. The disparity was not just quantitative, it was qualitative. American logistics operated as a system designed for the task. German logistics operated as an improvisation struggling with inadequate resources. Baumann wrote to Müller from Camp Hale, describing a conversation with an American soldier who had worked at the Willys Overland plant in Toledo, Ohio. Before conscription, he told me that Willys Overland employed approximately 15,000 workers manufacturing Jeeps. The factory operated 3 shifts daily, producing approximately 650 Jeeps per day at peak output. Ford's factory in Michigan produced comparable numbers. Together, the 2 factories were manufacturing over 1,000 Jeeps daily. Müller did the arithmetic. 1,000 Jeeps per day meant 7,000 per week, 30,000 per month, 360,000 per year. Germany had produced approximately 50,000 Kübelwagens during the entire war from 1940 through 1945. America was producing that many Jeeps in 6 weeks. The numbers had been available in intelligence reports since 1942, but experiencing the results of those numbers in the field made them real in ways that reports never could. Every convoy destroyed was replaced. Every vehicle captured was outnumbered by vehicles remaining. Every tactical success was rendered strategically meaningless by overwhelming material abundance. By late 1944, prisoners received news of the Ardennes offensive, Germany's last major attack in the West. Initial reports were optimistic, suggesting German forces had achieved surprise and were advancing toward Antwerp. But within days, the offensive had clearly stalled. Within 2 weeks, it had failed. By January of 1945, German forces were retreating from the Ardennes, having gained nothing and lost equipment they could not replace. Weber, analyzing the offensive from captivity, recognized the fundamental flaw immediately. The operation had been planned assuming German forces could capture American fuel supplies because German logistics could not deliver sufficient fuel for sustained armored operations. The entire strategy depended on stealing enemy resources to sustain the attack. This was not military planning. This was desperation admitting that Germany's logistics system had failed. Moreover, the offensive had relied heavily on captured American vehicles. Otto Skorzeny's commandos had used captured jeeps and trucks because German vehicles were insufficient in number and reliability. When the elite of German special operations depended on enemy equipment to function, the message was clear. German industry had lost the production war. The war ended in May of 1945. Prisoners received the news with complex emotions. Relief that the killing had stopped. Anxiety about what defeat meant for Germany's future. Shame at the catastrophe that German aggression had brought upon Europe. But also, for those who had studied American logistics closely, a degree of understanding about why defeat had been inevitable. Germany had challenged industrial powers, whose production capacity exceeded German capabilities, by factors too large to overcome through tactical or operational excellence. The Wehrmacht had fought with skill and determination. German soldiers had demonstrated courage repeatedly. German officers had shown competence. German equipment had been sophisticated and effective. None of it had mattered because modern war was decided by industrial systems, not battlefield heroics. The repatriation process began in late 1945 and continued throughout 1946. Müller returned to Germany in February of 1946, processing through Allied control in Bremen before being released to make his way home. The city was ruins, rubble stretched in every direction, but amid the destruction, American vehicles were everywhere. Jeeps carrying occupation officers, GMC trucks delivering relief supplies, motor pools where German civilians worked alongside Allied soldiers. The vehicles that had contributed to Germany's defeat were now supporting Germany's survival. The irony was not lost on anyone. Müller found employment within weeks, hired by the American Occupation Authority to work in logistics coordination. His experience as a Wehrmacht officer made him valuable for understanding how to rebuild German infrastructure. His time as a prisoner in America had taught him how American systems operated. The work involved coordinating supply distribution across the American occupation zone. Food, medicine, construction materials, fuel, all arriving in quantities that would have seemed impossible during the war. The American relief effort operated on the same principles as American military logistics: abundant supplies, standardized procedures, efficient distribution. The same system that had defeated Germany was now preventing German starvation. Baumann found similar employment, working in motor pools maintaining Allied vehicles. The job paid in occupation script, redeemable for rations and necessities. More importantly, it provided structure and purpose in a devastated nation struggling to recover. Many former Wehrmacht mechanics found such work. The Allies needed mechanics desperately. German mechanics needed employment. The arrangement benefited both parties. Over months, Müller observed the beginning of Germany's reconstruction. American aid flowed systematically, distributed with efficiency that reflected careful planning. The Marshall Plan, announced in June of 1947, formalized what had been operating informally since the war's end. America would invest billions in rebuilding European economies, including Germany's. The logic was strategic. A prosperous Europe would resist communist influence better than a devastated Europe. A rebuilt Germany, integrated into Western structures, would not threaten future wars. But the execution reflected the same industrial philosophy that had won the war. Abundant resources applied systematically to achieve clear objectives. Müller worked with American planners who approached Germany's reconstruction with the same systematic thinking they had applied to military logistics. Identify needs, allocate resources, establish measurable objectives, monitor progress, adjust as necessary. The process was not sentimental or ideological. It was pragmatic problem-solving backed by enormous resources. One American captain, a former industrial engineer from Michigan named Roberts, became a regular colleague. Roberts had served in logistics during the war and understood how American production capacity had contributed to victory. "The thing you have to understand," Roberts explained during one conversation, "is that America spent the 1920s and 30s learning how to manufacture automobiles in massive quantities. That experience translated directly to military production. We didn't have to invent mass production during the war. We just had to apply existing capabilities to military equipment. This was the foundation that Germany had lacked. German automotive industry had focused on craftsmanship and sophisticated engineering. German manufacturers produced excellent vehicles in moderate quantities. American manufacturers had focused on volume and cost reduction. American manufacturers produced adequate vehicles in enormous quantities. In peacetime, German vehicles commanded premium prices and cultivated prestigious reputations. In wartime, American vehicles overwhelmed battlefields through sheer numbers. The Jeep was key, Roberts continued, not because it was the best vehicle, but because it was good enough, and we could make it in quantities that met any demand. We produced 640,000 Jeeps during the war, took them everywhere, every theatre, every unit, every role imaginable. By the war's end, the Jeep had become synonymous with American military power because it was everywhere, always working, always available. Müller thought about his first encounter with a Jeep in October of 1941. The vehicle had looked like a toy, simple and unsophisticated. That assessment had been technically correct and strategically blind. The Jeep's simplicity was its strength. Simple designs could be manufactured quickly by semi-skilled workers. Simple maintenance kept vehicles operational with minimal training. Simple logistics provided parts and support without complex supply chains. Baumann had reached similar conclusions working in occupation motor pools. He saw young German workers being trained in American maintenance procedures, learning the simple, systematic approach that American mechanics used. These workers would form the foundation of Germany's rebuilt automotive industry, carrying knowledge of American methods into German factories. "We're learning from them," Baumann mentioned during one reunion with Müller in late 1947. "The Americans are teaching us how to build vehicles their way. Standardized components, simple designs, volume production. It's not the German tradition, but it's what works in modern industry." This synthesis of German engineering precision and American production efficiency would characterize Germany's economic recovery. Companies like Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW would emerge from the ruins by combining German attention to quality with American emphasis on standardization and volume. The result would be an automotive industry that dominated global markets for decades. The Volkswagen Beetle, which became one of history's best-selling automobiles, embodied this synthesis. The design was German, evolved from the Kübelwagen's engineering, but the production philosophy was American, emphasizing standardization, simplification, and volume manufacturing. Volkswagen would eventually produce over 21 million Beetles, eclipsing even the Jeep's production numbers. The vehicle that succeeded was the one that learned from both traditions. By 1950, West Germany was showing clear signs of economic recovery. Industrial production was approaching pre-war levels. Employment was growing, living standards were improving. The economic miracle, as it would be called, was built on lessons from defeat. Germany had learned that modern manufacturing required systems, not masterpieces. That standardization enabled scale. That simplicity enabled reliability. That volume production served better than limited production of sophisticated goods. These were lessons taught by the Jeep, not through its technical specifications, but through its strategic impact. The vehicle had been everywhere during the war, in every theatre, every role, every situation where light transport was needed. It had worked reliably, required minimal maintenance, and been manufactured in numbers that made replacement trivial. The humble Jeep had demonstrated principles that would shape post-war manufacturing worldwide. Müller retired from occupation service in 1952, returning to civilian life in a Germany that was rapidly transforming. The ruins were being cleared, new construction was rising, and optimism was replacing despair. He occasionally encountered other former Wehrmacht officers, men who had served in various theatres and capacities. Their conversations often turned to the war, not with nostalgia, but with analytical reflection on what had gone wrong. The consensus was consistent. Germany had lost the industrial war long before losing the military war. American production capacity, built during peacetime and expanded during conflict, had created material superiority that no amount of German skill could overcome. The Jeep symbolized this disparity because it was the most visible evidence. 640,000 vehicles, appearing everywhere, working reliably, supplied abundantly. In 1953, an American military historian named Samuel Morrison interviewed former Wehrmacht officers for a comprehensive study of German assessments of Allied equipment. Müller participated, providing detailed accounts of his experiences with captured Jeeps, observations of American logistics, and analysis of why German vehicles could not compete strategically despite often superior technical specifications. Morrison asked a question that cut to the heart of the matter. If German engineering was superior, why did it lose to American engineering? Müller considered his response carefully. American engineering was not inferior. It was different. German engineering optimized for performance. American engineering optimized for production. In peacetime, our approach created better individual vehicles. In wartime, their approach created better vehicle systems. We built masterpieces. They built adequate products in overwhelming quantities. Modern war rewards the second approach. This assessment would appear in Morrison's published work, cited as representative of German professional military opinion. The Jeep had not been the best vehicle of World War II by any single technical metric. It had been the most effective vehicle because effectiveness in war was measured by strategic impact, not technical specifications. And strategic impact came from numbers multiplied by reliability, multiplied by logistical support. The Jeep excelled in all three dimensions. Weber, who had written the prescient analysis in 1942, also participated in post-war historical studies. His perspective had been validated by events, though that validation brought no satisfaction. I identified the problem in 42, Weber told Morrison. But identifying problems and solving them are different challenges. Germany could not have matched American production capacity regardless of policy changes. The industrial foundation required decades to build. America built that foundation during the 20s and 30s. Germany tried to build equivalent capacity during wartime under Allied bombing. The task was impossible. This understanding shaped post-war German industrial policy. West Germany would not attempt to recreate pre-war approaches. Instead, it would adapt American methods while maintaining German quality standards. The synthesis would prove extraordinarily successful, creating an export-oriented manufacturing economy that became Europe's strongest. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now, and don't forget to subscribe.